Okay, everybody, welcome to the very first Destination Marketing Podcast with Adam Stoker and Jordan Barker. This is the pilot episode, and we're excited to get started, but Jordan, why in the world are we doing a tourism marketing podcast?
That's a good question. I think one of the reasons that we started this, a common question that we get from a lot of our clients is where can they go for resources? If they want to learn about what's happening in the destination space, obviously there's things like trade shows they can go to. That gets expensive, right? If you have to go and show up in person to every single one of those. And so one of the things that we talked about was there's not a real great podcast out there today where people can go and learn about what kind of the current events are, what's happening, how can we be better marketers within the destination space. And so we thought we'd take a crack at it, get some people on the podcast that are subject matter experts that we can learn from and share that with everybody here on the podcast.
Great. And you know, it's probably important for us to outline why should people care what we have to say, right? Who are we? My name's Adam Stoker, and together with Jordan and a couple of partners, I own Relic. It's an advertising agency that focuses on tourism, and we've been in the tourism industry now since 2012. We work with several destinations here in Utah, also California, Michigan, and other places across the country, and really we've grown to love tourism, and we live and breathe it now. We have 21 employees here in Provo, Utah, and yeah, we love being in the tourism space and want to help, all boats rise in the tide and help everybody grow and improve their marketing efforts, whether they work with us or with someone else or do it on their own. We want to give people the tools to get better and better. How about you, Jordan? Why should people care what you have to say?
They shouldn't, honestly. They really shouldn't care, to be the truth be told. No, I think, so my background, like Adam alluded to, I'm one of the partners here. I've been doing digital marketing for, I guess, a little over 10 years now. And, it's been a lot of fun for me to get involved in the tourism industry and to be able to leverage a lot of different technologies. And so one of the things that I'm really passionate about is taking a lot of the enterprise level pieces of software that I've been able to deploy over my career and being able to apply that to the tourism space and to be able to figure out what technology makes sense and how can people who might be on a tighter budget than most, how can they leverage those tools? So I think those are some of the things that we're going to be covering in the podcast. We'll be uncovering, what technology should destination marketers be using? What are some current trends? What are we seeing? Where are we seeing wins? Where are we seeing challenges? And then, hopefully being able to, like I said before, bring other folks on the podcast that can kind of speak to some of the success that they've had in the space and some of their tips and tricks as well.
Yeah. We go to a lot of industry trade shows for tourism, right? And I think they get some wonderful motivational speakers that come in there and they'll either tell you how to be a better person or to be more motivated or excited, or they'll tell you if you have a $20 million budget, here's what you should be doing, right? But most of our clients don't have those kind of budgets.
That's a challenge whenever you go to one of those shows. It's really inspiring, and you love to hear those stories, right? Where you get someone that goes up on stage and they have a $50 million a year budget, and so they have the flexibility and the freedom to do a lot of fun things with that, right? The challenge, from what we've heard at least in the industry, is how do you action that? And so I think that's one of the reasons that we thought it would be fun to have a podcast where we can talk about big ideas, but then we can also talk to folks and share some of our successes as well, how we've been able to do things that are a bit more hands-on and practical and some of the applications of those things.
Yeah, I think you can expect a little bit more of a how-to, right? With a lot of the things that we've seen and a lot of the tactics that are working right now in the industry, instead of, hey, what you need to do is achieve this outcome. Instead, it's, hey, here's the exact step-by-step of how to get there. So, without a video component to this, there might be times when we give you a URL, or maybe we'll post the show notes so that people can get access to the tools that we talk about on this program. But really, this is not a fluffy podcast, right? This is dive deep in the weeds and how do you get it done?
Right. So we talked about tourism a little bit. I know you mentioned the background of the agency, how we came to be, but why tourism? Tell the people how you got involved in tourism? How did that happen?
Funny you should ask.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, funny you should ask. So I worked for a small agency at the time. It was called Sorensen Advertising. That, spoiler alert, eventually became the agency that we bought and rebranded into Relic. But I was in Cedar City, Utah, and I saw the Cedar City tourism office, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to go see if those guys need help with their advertising. And I walked in the door, and it just so happened, and I mean, you know, so many things in your career is timing, right?
Yep.
And these guys just happened to be, they had just decided they wanted to engage with an agency. And so, man, walked in the door, and they're like, oh, hey, you know, we've just been meaning to talk to an agency. And we were able to put together a plan that, in all honesty, had a lot of flaws, right? But they trusted us and engaged with us, and we were able to learn through trial and error what works and doesn't work, and ended up having a lot of success for Cedar City. Have had them as a client since 2012, and still have them as a client today.
Good stuff.
Jordan, let's learn a little bit about, before we go, because I want to talk a little bit more in depth, kind of where we're trying to go with tourism. But tell us a little bit about your background prior to getting into the agency world, because you got a little different path than I do.
Yeah, for sure. So one thing that Adam and I talk a lot about, we've known each other for a long time. We actually went to high school together, so I've got a lot of dirt on Adam, which is good and bad because he has.
But I know where all the bodies are buried.
That's true. That's a good point. So we've known each other for a long time, but my background, Adam actually got me started in the agency world. We worked for a really small, unsophisticated digital marketing agency back in the day, and that's kind of where I cut my teeth on digital marketing. And Adam went the more traditional route, worked at some other traditional agencies, and I went the digital route. Worked at a company called Alliance Health, ran their digital marketing for a while, about 4 years, and then went to a company called Pluralsight and ran all of their digital marketing for about 3 years. So that's kind of my background. And so we, like you said, we've known each other for a long time. We've kept in communication and wanted to try to see if we could put together some solutions for the tourism industry and how we might be able to solve some of those problems that the tourism industry faces.
So when you were in the tech industry, what tactics did you work with, especially in digital marketing, that you feel like translate well to the tourism industry but may not necessarily be fully utilized the way it should be now in the industry?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think, a lot of times I think people think about different channels and they want to say, hey, are you doing Facebook or are you doing paid search, or what are the different channels that you're leveraging? And one thing that we found successful outside of the tourism industry is leveraging multiple channels and going where the buyers are, right? So in this case, it's going where your visitors are and going to those watering holes. And so what we found is, instead of trying to say, hey, let's just run some Facebook ads, well, they might be on Facebook, but then tomorrow they might be searching for a specific set of keywords, or the next day they may be on, KSL.com or something like that, right? So really where we found success, and I think that this is something where I think we could probably do a better job in the tourism industry, is making sure that it's a multifaceted or multi-pronged approach when we talk about marketing, making sure that you're hitting them in all of the different watering holes, and making sure that that brand experience is consistent. So if you see an ad, if you see a banner ad, for example, the tone, the messaging, the call to action, that's consistent if they saw the exact same ad or a similar ad on Facebook or paid search. And I think that's an area where, at least what we've seen, especially as we do things like audits and we look at some of their current efforts and where we might be able to add some value, I think that's where we found some real gaps, is making sure that there's consistency across channels and that we're leveraging the channels appropriately so that it's all one cohesive message that kind of rolls up into one uniform campaign.
Makes sense. And on a further episode, maybe not today, but I want to dive in a little bit to how your business-to-business experience in the tech industry could be utilized better for conventions and events in the tourism industry. I think we'll do a whole episode on that because there's so much content there. But a little teaser for people to keep listening. I think that's going to be a big value episode, especially if you're on the convention side of your destination that you work in. So we'll get to that at another time. As far as the industry as a whole, the tourism industry as a whole, I want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that I think a lot of our current clients run into, but also DMOs across the country that don't work with us. And attribution is the big hot button right now in tourism.
Right.
And you know, the challenge that we have is that for most of these, especially if you're talking about a smaller DMO or destination, the destination or county or city organization that forms the DMO runs the advertising campaign, right? And then the hotel or restaurant or guide or outfitter or whoever it is that's actually receiving the benefit of that advertising, they collect that revenue, whether it's through their website or somebody walks into their storefront or whatever, right?
Right.
And it's very difficult to build the bridge between, you know, the print ad or digital ad or billboard or whatever it was that drove that conversion. So how do we look at that? How do we talk about that? And how do we make sure that not only our clients but anybody who's in the industry can make sure they're making the right decisions on what's working and what's not?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, there's a few different options, right? One option is if you do have the budget and you have enough impressions that you're serving, there's tools like Adara, there's tools like Arrivalist, and you know, we should probably double click on those tools at some point on a future podcast too. But those are effectively tools that you can use to measure down to the channel level how effective your marketing dollars are being. So that's the kind of the pro of those tools, right? You can get really specific about what your return on investment is down to a channel level or down to a campaign level. The drawback of those products is that you have to be a certain size, and they're fairly expensive. So they eat up a good chunk of budget for some smaller DMOs, right? And so I think depending on the bucket that you fit into is going to depend on really how you think about attribution and how you should solve that problem, right? At least that's how I think about things. If you're a smaller destination, and I think that's something that, you know, we're actively trying to tackle ourselves too, right? We've got some ideas and some thoughts around that. But I think even capturing some of the micro events that happen within the buyer journey, right, within the visitor's journey. And so what I mean by that is, you know, if you're not capturing conversion events on your site today, so if you're running ads anywhere, whether that's Facebook or paid search, display, etc., and you're not capturing some form of a conversion event, like a brochure request, or, you know, if I'm going to be booking or if I'm going to be creating an itinerary right there on my site, you can actually track each of those events. So I can at the very least, I could tell you, okay, I spent X amount of dollars on Facebook, I drove the visitor to the site, this was what happened, and this is how much it cost me to do that, right? So there's little micro events that you can still track, in addition to the, you know, the lodging tax or the TRT that is collected. There's other kind of micro conversion events that you can track as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I think one of the benefits of being the one that put together the outline for this podcast is I get to ask you all the hard questions.
These
and
are hard.
I don't have to answer them myself. But another question I do want to ask you is there's a couple of, conversion events that most destinations are tracking, right? One is a brochure request. Another is joining the email list. Another is maybe liking a social media page or something like that. And there's several others, you know. But what would you say the value is right now of a brochure request versus an email database join or a newsletter subscribe? How do you look at that?
Yeah, I think you bring up an interesting question, and I think this is really the big challenge that we talk about, right, with destination marketing is how do you think about those events and how do you equate a value to those? I think, again, we'll talk about, you know, some of the more sophisticated tools, and if budget allows, there's some really granular ways that you can measure the impact of those. But as far as the different levels, I think it all comes back to engagement, and it all depends on where that visitor is in their booking journey, right? So as you think about things like there's still value when you take a look at those conversion events. So if someone's downloading a brochure request, the level of intent is definitely there to visit your destination, right? So then how do you action that? Well, I think it's a great opportunity for you to capture that info. And if you have an email marketing program in place, whether that's marketing automation, ideally, or if nothing else, it allows you to create a dialogue with that visitor. So if they download a brochure request, you have their info, and then you can start to learn from them, right? And you can capture their info on Facebook. You can capture them, you know, a variety of different places. But then I think that the trick is, how do I then learn based off of their behavior and their actions? And then I think that's really where the value comes into play, right? Because if I know I capture their info, I've got their email address, and then I know they went back to my site and they visited the fishing section or the camping section or the section. I can then at least understand them and then start to tailor my messaging, whether that be a follow-up email, whether that be bucketing them differently, serving them a different set of ads. There's a lot that I can still glean, even though I can't directly tie back, I spent $15 on this particular ad set within Facebook to ROI booked room perfectly. I still think there's some good engagement metrics that I can still learn from and tailor my message accordingly and understand what engagement looks like, if that makes sense.
I think that's great. I think another way to look at it is anytime you get someone to give you their information, it's essentially you have my permission to market to me, right? And so once we get that permission, it basically opens the door for us to first identify where they're at in the buying cycle, right? And once we identify where they are, we can move that person through and funnel them towards a conversion. But none of that can happen until we capture their information and get permission to do that, right? And so we use several different marketing automation tools, and maybe one day we'll do an entire session or episode about which tools are best to handle marketing automation, especially within the tourism industry.
Right.
But we use those tools to then identify and move them through the funnel. So I think the value of a brochure request, if it's just a brochure request and we send them a brochure and that's it, is zero. Right? But if we're smart about what we do with that information, right? When they give us the opportunity to market to them, if we're smart about what we do with them, the value of a brochure request is incredibly high, right? So anyway, and we'll talk more in depth about that as we go through the podcast. But I think sometimes those minor conversion events get a little undervalued in the tourism industry, especially when people, there's people that say print is dead, and the idea of printing these brochures every year gets a little cumbersome, right? But the value of collecting that information, to me, in a lot of cases, is worth every penny.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool.
Well, I think one thing at this point, because people have been listening to us, jive for a few minutes here, I think it's important for people to know that it's not just going to be you and I on the podcast
Thank
every
goodness
week.
For that, yeah.
I think, plus we think we're pretty smart, but I don't think we're the industry experts on every single topic. So we're going to be bringing guests on. Right. Do you want to maybe preview the types of guests that we might have or some of the questions we might tackle as time goes on?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that, one thing that we want to do with this podcast is, I think, and Adam will touch on this here in a minute, but we want to make it as interactive as possible. So if there are questions from listeners out there, we want to be able to field those and be able to respond to those. And that will kind of help guide and direct the types of individuals that we'll have on the podcast as well. But I think, one thing that we want to try to get is we want to get subject matter experts in the different topics that we want to tackle, right? So we'll be talking to individuals that are trying to solve the attribution problem, right? So we'll be talking to different technologies and different platforms that will help us and allow us to do that. We'll also be talking to other, destination marketers that are struggling with a lot of the challenges that we've talked about today on the podcast. So I think it's going to be a pretty good mix of individuals that are really in the trenches trying to figure out how to solve a lot of these marketing issues. And in conjunction with that, we're going to bring a lot of thought leaders that are subject matter experts in terms of leveraging the various technologies that are out there and how we should think about those. And at what point within the marketing funnel do we introduce those, and how do we measure success, and what does that look like? So I think that's kind of where we're headed.
Yeah. The technology that's available in the tourism industry, there's some pretty incredible stuff out there, right? Yeah. And I think we're going to try to have some of those companies come on and maybe share the breakthroughs in technology that they've had that could value, destinations across the world. I think the other thing that I want to make sure that I stress is, if anybody's listening and you've had a breakthrough or you've done something that's proven to be really effective, come talk to us about it. Let's have you on an episode, and why don't you share with if you're willing to share, if you're one of those altruistic people that wants to help others, come on our podcast and share with other destination marketers. In fact, we've just barely in the last few weeks created a LinkedIn group. And it's called Destination Marketers. So this podcast is called the Destination Marketing Podcast, but the LinkedIn group is called Destination Marketers. And if you haven't joined that group, go join that group, because one of the things that we're going to do is collect topics within that group. So if you have something you'd like us to tackle, if you're struggling with something that you want us to bring on a subject matter expert to talk about, post it there in the LinkedIn group and we'll tackle it.
Right.
Jordan, what about, I'm going to change gears here a little bit, because this has all been very like business oriented, right?
Okay.
I want to change gears since we're talking about tourism, and we're going to ask some of these last questions to any guest we have on the podcast moving forward. But what's the most amazing place you've ever visited, Jordan?
Oh, man, I'm not that exciting is the problem. I think one of my favorite places to go is honestly San Francisco, believe it or not. I don't know what it is about that place, but in a previous role that I had, we had to go to San Francisco quarterly, and so just kind of got to know the city really well, and all the local food hangouts, got to know those pretty well, obviously. Obviously, you don't get to weigh as much as I do without getting to really know the food joints intimately. And so San Francisco is honestly one of my favorite places to go. I spent a couple of years living in Brazil, so that was probably the most exotic place that I've ever been, but I need to get out more. The challenge is I've got a wife who is deathly afraid to fly. And so that limits our ability to travel a little bit.
A lot of staycations.
A lot of staycations, a lot of like driving destinations, right? So so that makes things a bit challenging. But whenever we get the opportunity, I try to like save up the anxiety that it causes her. And so, San Francisco is probably about that's not a terrible plane ride, right?
About as far as she's willing to go. Okay.
Yeah. What about you? Where have you been?
Well, I tell you, the most amazing place I've ever been, I had the opportunity in 2015 to take my wife to Fiji. And it was this little resort with 13 huts on an island. You could kayak around the island in about an hour and a half. And we just had an incredible time. It was 5-star dining for every meal. Spoiler alert: I didn't pay for it. It was a incentive for the job that I had. And anyway, we felt like we were living the life out there in Fiji, and the place was beautiful. It rained every single day, and it didn't even bother us, because we were just in heaven, and so it was a great time. Went snorkeling, and I mean, once you put your head under the water, there's a whole new world under there, and so we saw some amazing things snorkeling, and had our own little hut. And anyway, the shower was outside, so that was kind of weird and crazy, cool. and we just had a blast, man. The plane ride is pretty aggressive.
Yeah. The wife's not getting on that plane, I think. Yeah.
Well, so you need to know this then, if you guys ever were considering Fiji, because there's a plane ride from L.A. to Fiji,
okay.
Right?
Yep.
And then you get off of that plane and you go to this airport that's pretty interesting looking, okay?
Okay.
And there's this tiny little prop plane with like 10 seats in it.
Nope. Yep, not happening.
And you can hear the everything's rattling.
Yep, that's not happening. There's no way she's getting on that plane.
And we had to fly another 2 hours to the little island.
Wow.
And it was an island next to the island we stayed on, and then there was another 45-minute boat ride out to the island we stayed at. So I don't think she'd love that.
Yeah, that probably won't happen. We'll stick with like Vegas, St. George, maybe a San Francisco trip here and there. That's probably the extent of it. But yeah, that sounds amazing, actually. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Okay, independent of your wife's fears,
yes.
What's your dream destination? Where would you like to go?
This is embarrassing. So I'm 34. Am I still 34? Yep, 34. 34 years old. I've never been to Hawaii before. So I would love to go to Hawaii. We'll probably have to take a boat if we're going to get there with my wife's fear of flying, so it might take us a minute to get there.
That's a long cruise.
But I would love to go to Hawaii. I've seen pictures, obviously, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. So Hawaii is probably my destination. What about you? Would you go back to Fiji, or would you go somewhere new?
Oh, man, someday I'll go back to Fiji, but I don't know if I'll make that my dream destination today. New Zealand for me just looks like a magical place. And I love to fish, and some of the most amazing trout fishing areas are in New Zealand, and they're pretty untouched, right?
Sure.
So even a bad fisherman like me could probably catch fish there. And the mountainous terrain, and it's kind of a place that has everything. And so I would love to go check out.
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
That'd be fun.
All right. Now, I'm going to get a little more serious here. What is the most important component of marketing for a destination?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think really making sure that you talk about the brand of a destination, right? You talk about being true to that. And I think we've all probably been to conferences where they show the marketing message and then they show like actual real life. And so I think staying true to whatever brand image and brand message that you have out there live in the marketplace, because you're not going to do yourself any favors. Like I talk about San Francisco, right? The reason that I love to go back is because it's a great experience every time that I go back. And so therefore I want to keep returning. So if you have imagery of this really beautiful, nice place with 0 people there, and it looks like it's just going to be you and your significant other, I mean, I get it. There's got to be some like marketing element there, so I understand. But I also think you need to be true to your brand promise and that identity that you represent in marketing. There's a way to do that without misleading people, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, the messaging and the experience have to match.
They have
right?
to, right? Yeah. Otherwise, I get there and I feel a little bit, frustrated that I got there and all of a sudden I'm like, wait a second. This isn't what I thought it was going to be at all, and then I'm never coming back to your destination again, right? So make sure that you have that, like there's a way to represent it and put it through a marketing lens and still make it really attractive, but it still needs to be true to my actual experience once I get there if you want me as a repeat visitor and you want me coming back again and again.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I'm gonna answer a little bit differently, but in the same vein. I feel like a lot of people spend a lot of money to get people to their destination, right? And then once people get there, there's not a lot of tools. There's not a lot of you kind of have to figure it out on your own.
Now
right?
what? Right? Yeah.
Yeah, and as dumb as it is, wayfinding signs, right? I think wayfinding signs are super important in a destination.
Right.
For when somebody arrives there, it's not like they know that 3 blocks away is this major attraction, right? So I think people need to invest in the infrastructure once somebody gets there. But on the marketing side, I'm going to go back to the well a little bit and say that marketing automation, using the data you collect effectively, has got to be the most important component, because there's no other way, or there's very few other ways to get that permission and then be able to visually see them progress through the funnel. So I definitely think marketing automation is something that is underutilized in the tours. Everybody's got a MailChimp account, right? But that's not what we're talking, right? We're talking automated email nurture sequences or nurture tracks that we can identify people's interests and market to them accordingly. I think there's so much opportunity there, and I'd love to have at least one episode about that as we go.
How do you know where to... I mean, we talk a lot about what's important in marketing. We talk a lot about how to think about it, how to measure it. How do you know where to start? Like, I guess that's another thing that we should probably tackle, and maybe that's another episode in and of itself, but... How do you know where to start? There's so much out there. I
think we treat that a little bit like a teaser for another episode, right? Because in all seriousness, I think there is so much to tackle. There's so many different directions you could go down. I would start with, does my messaging... Well, let me back up, actually. Marketing is as simple as this. Get the right message to the right people at the right time. So first thing, you look at, do you have the right message? And then, are you hitting the right people, and is it hitting at the right time? And if you can combine those three, that's where you start.
Yep.
That's the the magic formula in marketing, but it's not as easy as it sounds.
Right.
Cool. Okay, last thing, Jordan, and I'm not going to ask you this question again. What's the future of tourism marketing? Where's it going? What are we going to see?
Yeah, I think what we'll see is going to be not only I think it'll be tourism marketing for sure. But I think that it's going to have to get more and more measurable, right? And I think this is marketing in general, but certainly tourism marketing. Now more than ever, I mean, you can quantify just about everything, especially from a digital marketing lens, right? Like I can tell you how many people saw it. I can tell you how much it cost me to get a click to a page. I can tell you how much it cost to download a brochure request. But I think that, boards and individuals that are involved in tourism, they're asking hard questions, but they're asking the right questions, right? I mean, these are tax dollars. These are dollars that are very, very important. And so how are we spending those marketing dollars effectively? And how do we justify that, right? And so I think it's really easy, and again, this is probably another topic in and of itself, but it's really easy to say what we're doing today is working because look at the growth in terms of visitation, look at the growth in terms of, revenue collected. What we're doing is working. When you start to have, when you start to have different fluctuations in the economy and all of a sudden visitation is down, it's really hard to diagnose what's driving that and which channel are we down in and how do we fix it, right? And how much of that is marketing versus how much of that is other factors that might be outside of our control, economic conditions, political conditions, et cetera, right? And so I think that's something that we've got to tackle collectively as an industry. How do we get more sophisticated around that? How do we measure that? And then how do we make sure that we're staying on top of trends to make sure that we, are thinking about not just now, but 10, 15 years down the road so that we know, okay, this is a problem we've got to solve today, and how do we make sure that we're putting the right measurements in place today that will help us paint that picture for the future?
Yeah. Makes sense. I'm going to take it a little different direction as I probably will do a lot on this podcast.
Yeah, you would.
I actually think, so marketing, especially tourism marketing, it's about experiences, right? And I think we do a poor job in a lot of cases, we being tourism marketers in general, right, of helping the user or the potential visitor understand what their experience is going to be like, right? And so I actually think that there's a huge opportunity, and I hope it goes this way, and I'd love to be a part of it, to use virtual reality technology to help a user experience a little piece of our destination without attending, but have it be powerful enough of an experience for them to want to attend and have the full experience.
So like a teaser? Am I understanding that right? So you're saying before I even visit, so I want to go to Hawaii, I would experience the destination potentially before I'm even there.
And I think website experiences specifically, a website integrated with VR somehow.
Okay.
And I don't have all the answers as to how that's going to happen, right?
Right.
But we're talking about the future.
Sure.
I think that giving someone a taste of that experience that's not just a flat photo or video on a screen, but some way for them, especially people that already have the VR technology, whether it's a headset or the different VR components that are out there, I think there's going to be experiences to be had virtually that will then cause you to want to go have the real thing.
Makes sense.
And I would love to if anybody's in VR out there, I'd love to have you on the podcast and talk about that, because I do think that's where destination marketing is heading, because there's so many amazing experiences across the world. You've got to let somebody feel what it's going to be like in order to have them choose you over someone else. So what a great opportunity through VR. So anyway, who knows? I don't know how to do it, but would love to see it happen someday.
Makes sense. Yeah, makes sense.
All right. Well, this has been fun, Jordan. I hope everybody listening's had a good time. We will definitely have guests on from here on out to make sure that it's not as dry as it's been today.
Are you saying it was dry?
Only when you talked.
That's
only
fair.
when you talked.
Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to doing this with you and
This will be fun.
building it out.
This will be good stuff.
Okay. See everybody soon.
Thanks for listening.